This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Major events this week, something that I've been predicting all along. Others have been predicting as well. It's big news, but it's not unexpected news. And that is the opening of an impeachment inquiry against our 45th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Now, let's back up a little bit and see what's happened in terms of history. We, of course, have had two other impeachments in our history as a country. One was Andrew Jackson. The other was Bill Clinton. I actually played a role in that, as you know. Congressman Bob Barr, who's been on this show many times, and I collaborated on that, along with others, including impeachment manager David Shippers. Did not result in a conviction in the Senate because at that time, the Republicans, as they do today, lacked guts. They didn't want to carry through with it. This is a political hit on the president, and they're using the pretext of the phone call, which President Trump had with the president of the Ukraine. By the way, I'm half Ukrainian, but don't hold that against me. That my grandparents came from the Ukraine. They thought it was Russia, actually, at the time, but it was actually the Ukraine. Is that the President Zelensky, not to be confused with Aaron Zelensky, who brought the prosecution against Roger Stone, and we fought off in my successful defense of Jerry Corsi. There was a telephone conversation where the president asked for a favor to look into a scandal involving the Democratic Party and a sub-scandal involving the Bidens, that's Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, with regard to corruption, bribery, extortion, obtaining billions of dollars for the son of the then vice president. You know the story by now. I don't really need to get into it in great detail. Now, look, the president made a mistake. It was a tactical mistake. He should never have raised that issue with a foreign president because it gave the Democrats an opportunity, the jackals on Capitol Hill, to say that he was asking for a quid pro quo, that in fact he was trying to use a foreign leader against a political opponent, Joe Biden. It was unnecessary. The president made a mistake. It did not, however, constitute a crime, and it certainly doesn't rise to the level of an impeachable offense. But it wasn't smart. We have to be clear about that. Because in today's environment, after the Russian witch hunt effectively concluded, of course, the networks wanted to go on and on and on that anyway, giving you false hope, particularly on Fox, that there would be justice. And I'll explain later, there won't be any justice for that. And there won't be any justice from the Justice Department with regard to the Bidens either, because the president in that conversation implicated the Attorney General, Bill Barr, in someone who the president of Ukraine should communicate with. He's going to run for the exits as fast as Jeff Sessions ran for the exits before that with regard to the Russian collusion investigation. And there will be no justice with regard to the Bidens. Now, facetiously, I've said, what is Joe Biden's major defense here with regard to the fact that he shook down Ukraine earlier for billions of dollars for his son with an investment firm? Now, who is his son? Hunter Biden. The guy's a former drug addict. He's someone who would otherwise be living in the basement of his parents' house. He's never accomplished anything in his whole life, and yet he's reaping in billions of dollars. Now, maybe Joe Biden's defense is going to be, I'm so old and senile that I don't know what I'm doing. Now, that's somewhat believable, but it's not going to exonerate him from the crimes that were committed. Now, that's the real crime here. And Hunter Biden is on the line, too. His head is on the chopping block. Maybe he'll claim, well, maybe I went back to drugs and I didn't know what I was doing either. Just looking at these two characters, the son looks a lot like Joe Biden. They have that toothy, frankly, and excuse the French, S-eating grin. I mean, you feel like kind of punching them in the face. Of course, no one would do that. I don't advocate that. But they're just typical politicians. They're totally phony. They're not very intelligent people. And that's why when the president stepped in this, and that's what he stepped in earlier, this week when it was revealed through the so-called whistleblower, occurred before this week, but it came out this week. This was a major error. Make no mistake about it. The president is going to be impeached by the House of Representatives. They've looked for a reason to do it. We've been predicting that they're going to do it. And while the president will not be convicted in the Senate, the purpose of the Democrats, there's some method to this rabid madness. You remember during the Clinton years when impeachment ensued, this weakened Al Gore enough, that and the other Clinton scandals, of which he was a part, that it caused the election of George W. Bush, someone who was totally unqualified to be president, someone who was not the smartest knife in the drawer, someone who committed so many mistakes as president that it gave rise to a nervous reaction by the populace, and they wound up voting Barack Obama, one of the worst presidents in American history, into office. A president who ignited and stoked a race war. Now, we're going to have Joel Gilbert on again this week because I want him to explain what the reaction has been to his soon-to-be award-winning film. Of course, it's not going to win any awards in Hollywood, but it'll be with the rest of the country, showing that Trayvon Martin was a hoax, the whole incident, that George Zimmerman was innocent, and that phony witnesses were presented to try to get George Zimmerman convicted of a capital offense, which could have led to his life imprisonment and or the electric chair, because they still have the electric chair in my home state of Florida. This was the ignition point to the race war, and Obama, of course, stoked it. I want to have a son like Trayvon. It was not just with this, it was with Ferguson and everything else. So we're going to have Joel back to see what the media's reaction has been this week. But getting back to this issue at hand, and that is the president's almost certain impeachment at this point. The Democrats are trying to weaken him. They hope that that will win the election in 2020 because their candidates are a bunch of losers. They're ultra-leftists, socialists, atheists, radicals of every sort, every stripe, and they didn't stand a chance. And this is a Hail Mary attempt to take the president down. By going through impeachment right now, they're also seeking to weaken the economy because it creates uncertainty on Wall Street so they can claim that Trump hasn't done that great a job on the economy. They are putting the deep six into any deals the president may negotiate with China over trade, North Korea over nuclear weapons, and Iran for the same thing. Because who is going to cut a deal with a president that may be impeached? You see, so there is a method to this complete madness. And that is why they're willing to take this Hail Mary chance, which is going to preoccupy this country now, even past the elections, and it's going to paralyze what we're doing, not just in Washington, but around the country. Of course, paralyzing what they do in Washington is not necessarily bad, but there are a lot of things that this president is doing unilaterally overseas and with our economy and with immigration that are going to grind to a halt. Now, let's back up again for another issue. When you start watching Hannity on Fox or others, and they start claiming that there's going to be hell to pay to the Bidens, that they're going to be indicted, that they'll be convicted, that they'll be put away, just like they've been doing with regard to Comey, Rosenstein, McCabe, Strzok, Page, or Christopher Steele, and the whole lot of the criminals that engaged in the witch hunt of the president. Basically, turn the TV off, go do something more constructive. Like I said, watch the Golf Channel, watch the Tennis Channel, go do something that actually, go read a book. Don't waste your time with that because nothing's going to happen. We already have seen that Bill Barr is not much different as Attorney General than Jeff Sessions. He's taken a dive on 2 occasions just in the last few weeks with criminal referrals by the Inspector General of his own department, my alma mater, the Department of Justice, to indict Comey, to indict McCabe, to indict others. He's taken a dive because that's Washington. Is the elite in the end will protect each other. They'll burn some lower level officials, 1 or 2, and then they'll move on. And they'll continue to rake the money in. They'll continue to do whatever they do in Washington, but they don't represent the interests of the American people. So in comes Freedom Watch. In comes Larry Klayman. In comes people that want to support us. And we are going to be recommissioning, reestablishing, re-meeting with our citizens' grand juries in the next few weeks, either in late October or early November. And we will present evidence before the grand jury. I hope to get Peter Schweitzer there. He's the one that uncovered these Biden scandals. We can get him in person. We can bring him in by Skype. Peter's a good guy, and he's an excellent journalist, excellent investigative journalist. And we will indict Joe Biden. We will indict Hunter Biden. We will then try them before a citizen's court. We will have them sentenced, and then we will seek to mete out the sentences peacefully and legally. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and join our Justice League. Support our citizens' grand juries, because we are your Justice Department. No one else is going to do this. My former group is busy getting more documents. They can store their documents in their warehouse. You know, this is what they do with their $110 million of net worth. Get more documents. Well, you know, for that amount of money, you could buy the documents. Don't bother bringing Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. But it's what you do with documents that count. It's whether you're seeking justice that counts. And that's what we do at Freedom Watch. And that's what I did after I founded Judicial Watch and ran it for 10 years. Sure, I got documents, but we went beyond that, bringing hard-hitting cases. And now that's what we're doing at Freedom Watch with our citizens' grand juries, with our other hard-hitting cases that I'm going to talk about in the second segment of this show. Because time is short, ladies and gentlemen, fellow patriots. We can see the game that is being played in Washington by both political parties. And I might add, there are a number of Republicans that are about ready to jump ship against the president, to stab him in the back. We, the American people, must rise up. We must do it on our own. We must use groups like Freedom Watch to do that. And we must be fearless. We must pledge our honor and risk our lives to save this nation as one nation under God. I'm going to be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Listen carefully, because we have a lot of work to do.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Next Wednesday, I'm going to be in court in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia for my brave and valiant client, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Dr. Corsi, again, brought a case. He didn't just get documents. He didn't just complain. He didn't hide under his desk in his house. He sued Robert Mueller for illegal surveillance, for criminal grand jury leaks, and for attempting to suborn perjury, threatening him with an indictment if he did not offer false testimony against the president for Mueller's witch hunt, which was an attempt to take the president down. We have a suit that we filed against Mueller for hundreds of millions of dollars, not because Dr. Corsi's trying to get rich, but because that's the way you sock these people. That's the way you prevent this from happening again. And we're going to be in court, and I urge you to come and watch. See what it is that Larry Klayman, his clients do, that we're not just sitting around with documents, fiddling, playing cards with the documents, framing them, putting them on the wall with pictures of ourselves in tight knit shirts. But we are doing things that are very, very important. And this is what separates Freedom Watch today from Judicial Watch today. I want you to understand that. This is comparative advertising, but we need your support. Judicial Watch already has $110 million. We don't have that. We need to grow bigger and bigger and bigger because we are your Justice Department. Now, also coming down the line is Sheriff Joe Arpaio's case at the Ninth Circuit. After he was convicted of simple misdemeanor and the president pardoned him, he went up to the Ninth Circuit, asking the Ninth Circuit to vacate the conviction because it's now moot, given the fact that there's a pardon. So that case is going to be argued in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco on October 23rd. I hope you'll come and visit that as well. I'll be doing some of the argument. There's another lawyer that's going to be arguing on behalf of the sheriff as well. As you know, I've represented the sheriff in a number of capacities, not just with regard to his attempts the attempts to derail him as sheriff when long ago, this is several years ago, and not just with regard to Obama's illegal amnesty for 5 million illegal aliens. We succeeded in that. We killed Obama's executive order. And I'm also representing him in lawsuits against CNN, its CEO Jeff Zucker, Fredo, Chris Cuomo, Rolling Stone, Huffington Post, who defamed him, calling him a felon, trying to harm him, his family, and his career. And that case is going through the courts as well. It's now also in Washington, D.C. It's before one of the great judges in this country, one of the few, Judge Royce Lamberth. Now, interestingly enough, there are people who have intervened in Arpaio's case in the Ninth Circuit. You've got Gerald Nadler, that overstuffed blowhard, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. You've got other Democrats that are trying to tell the court that, in fact, the pardon should be nullified and that Sheriff Arpaio should go to prison. Can you believe that? And there's also an individual by the name of Michael Tiger who intervened in that case, someone who at one time was the nominated law clerk of William Brennan, but conservative groups opposed that, and he wound up losing that position, and ever since he's hated conservatives. This is someone who filed with 16 other law professors, leftist law professors, a complaint against Kellyanne Conway for simply speaking on Fox News. That was a bar complaint because Kellyanne actually is a lawyer. And I've had some issues with Michael Tiger as well that I'll get into some other time. But this is the environment that we live in today. If you support people like the president or my clients, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, strong conservatives, you can expect the left to do whatever they can to destroy you, to eliminate you, sometimes in more ways than just in terms of legal cases. And they will also try to eliminate you before bar associations and other things if you stick out there and try to do your job on behalf of the American people. We have to be unafraid. We cannot worry about the ramifications. And look at what's happening with the Bundys right now. And it shows you this is a bipartisan outrage. Cliven Bundy is before the Ninth Circuit after his indictment was dismissed by a hostile judge even in Nevada. Who is it that took that appeal that wants to get the dismissal of the indictment overturned? Can you believe it? The Bill Barr Justice Department is doing this. I don't even know that Barr knows what's going on. I mean, the poor guy is pulled in every direction, but it's being done by the U.S. attorney in Nevada that committed all the prosecutorial abuse, which I sued in terms of a countersuit. And I'm defending Bundy in that appeal. And we need your support. Go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Support that because Cliven Bundy stands for you. These are the things that I am doing, Larry Klayman, as an advocate at Freedom Watch and in my private capacity, and we need your support. I'll be right back with Joel Gilbert.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm bringing back my good friend, my colleague, and someone who is a true patriot, someone who is never afraid to say what the truth is. And he pays the price for that because even on certain conservative networks and media, they don't want to hear the full truth. They want people to come on to regurgitate the same thing over and over again that's politically correct, that doesn't offend, and will boost their ratings and advertising dollars. But Joel has always told it like it is. Joel, I want you to give a little background on some of the things that you've done, you know, the films that you've produced, because you're a great Hollywood producer and filmmaker that, frankly, groups like Fox News or networks like Fox News look sideways at because they can't take the heat in the kitchen. And you came out with a film recently, groundbreaking film called The Trayvon Hoax. You also wrote a book. It's out there. I want you to explain that hoax. We've got a good amount of time during this segment. And give us the reaction. Give us, you know, how you have been able to get this word out in the media, if at all, during the last week to week and a half, because it really is an outrage that this is being ignored by certain segments of even the conservative media.
Exactly. Well, I released the film and did a screening and press conference at all places of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., put out a press release to 20,000 media, invited every local bureau of the Washington media and the Press Club. It couldn't be more in their face, and a 500-seat theater. And I explained the film. It's called The Trayvon Hoax, Unmasking the Witness Fraud That Divided America. Very relevant and shocking story. I went and researched the entire Trayvon Martin case, got Trayvon's 750-page cell phone records, and I discovered and I proved 10 ways from Sunday, including with DNA analysis, photos, handwriting analysis, that the girl that came to court, people remember that plus-size Rachel Gentile, that the prosecution built their case on this so-called girlfriend who was on the phone with Trayvon up to the minutes before his death. I found the real girlfriend. I proved that Rachel Gentile was a fraud. She was a fraudulent witness that was inserted in to get the indictment against Zimmerman and bring the case to trial for this political agenda to divide the country, starting with getting Obama reelected. I found the real girlfriend, Diamond Eugene. She's in the movie. And nothing could be more shocking and relevant to the race relations in the country, how they took a dive, and how Black Lives Matter was formed, the Ferguson effect. No one has suffered worse from this than the black youth of America. And it's relevant to politics as well, because Al Sharpton was in on it. He was in on this Trayvon Martin case from the get-go with the parents of Trayvon Martin. People remember him from the Tawana Brawley hoax and much other mayhem up in the Northeast where he incited riots. And this is the guy that all the Democrat candidates go to get the seal of approval, and he's going to be a big part of the presidential campaign. And to give you more background, that week when I was at the press club doing the screening, the mainstream media was obsessing over a story that Brett Kavanaugh may have exposed himself at a party 30 years ago, and the victim doesn't even remember it. So this is the state of affairs with the mainstream media. So it's an extremely significant story. It's a major witness fraud, and Kavanaugh himself was a victim of witness fraud. So this story is very important for people to understand and know. And the disappointing thing, as you mentioned, a lot of the conservative media stayed away. Town Hall did cover it, and a few others, but Breitbart, for example, we presented it to them, and they're afraid to cover it. And this is a phenomenon that began really back in 2010, 11, 12, and it happened. I had experience with it with my film Dreams from My Real Father about Obama's background. Back in 2012, right before it came out, I had a friend took it to Roger Ailes at Fox News, and he showed it to him in his office, and Roger's jaw dropped, and he said, "Oh, my God, this is incredible, but we can't touch this." And already by that time, people remember that Glenn Beck had to leave Fox News because Media Matters and other leftist outlets went after the advertisers. So conservative outlets engage in self-censorship, and that prevents them from covering the real news too often, and that's the case right now.
Well, they're so afraid of being called racist. Anytime you touch anything with African Americans or Muslims or whatever, they run away from it. Fox News would never even say that Obama was half Muslim. I mean, what's racist about that?
Well, this is what with my film, they realized at some point, they said, well, we were afraid to talk about Obama's background. I mean, my film, Dreams from My Real Father, it showed that the number one influence in his life, by his own admission, was Frank Marshall Davis, the Communist Party agitator out of Chicago that moved to Hawaii. And I showed a lot of evidence that this was likely his real biological father and not the Kenyan. Either way, Fox wouldn't touch it. And I have the most significant film today that people are already reacting to. It's also a book on Amazon, or you can see the trailer on the TrayvonHoax.com. And getting a lot of black teenagers are emailing and making comments online, and they're saying, man, we grew up with this idea that there are armed white men in the streets that want to harm us because of our skin color. And we've been doing these activism, Black Lives Matter protests. Colin Kaepernick, of course, took a knee and protested America, left the 49ers, and hating America became mainstream. And
here's the irony, Joel, is that My good client and friend, Dimitri Penny, who is also very courageous, an African-American policeman in Dallas, he'll speak out. He brought lawsuits, over the attacks on his brothers that killed 5 of them, that was stoked by Farrakhan, by Black Lives Matter, by the New Black Panthers Party. He was vilified. He was called a House N. He was called an Uncle Tom. His life was threatened. He had to move his family. The conservative blacks, the African Americans, are more courageous than the whites. The whites run for the exits, by and large. And that's the problem, because the more you run away from things like this, the more it's going to happen. And if anybody sees your film or reads your book, you can see that, there's nothing racist about it. You just give the facts, just the facts.
Exactly. I have not had one word of criticism along those lines, and no criticism at all. I've only had compliments, especially from black people, because they know this is where it all started. This was ground zero. Race relations were rated as positive by both blacks and whites up to 2012. After this case, it's always been negative. This is where all the race hoaxes and fake news started in the Trayvon Martin case. If they could make up Skittles and iced tea, of course, social activists make up hands up, don't shoot, because they know the media will not even question these crazy narratives. And it even continues to this day. You saw even what happened on Capitol Hill yesterday. The Democrats make up this total nonsense, and the media runs with it. When did that start? That was the Trayvon Martin case, where they said George Zimmerman is a racist white thug, when in fact he was a Hispanic minority activist Obama supporter. And this was the turning point. That's why I think this film has the best chance to really bring healing to the country when people see it, and people need to be held accountable and have a reckoning. Rachel Gentile needs to come forward and tell what really happened. Diamond Eugene needs to come forward. Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Fulton, who's now running for Miami-Dade commissioner, she's a politician now. My film has all the evidence that she knew about this witness switch, and she didn't say anything, and she allowed the trial to go forward anyway. So a lot of people have a lot of answering to do, and in that process, I want to see accountability, and I want to see healing.
Well, right. There needs to be justice here. These people need to be held accountable. It's not enough to say, okay, I'm 16-year-old, I'm a minor, gee, I didn't know what I was doing. This false testimony could have put George Zimmerman away for life and could have gotten him the electric chair. And this is not a simple matter. I've said this before. We see this every day in the court system. That's why I myself have become the anti-lawyer. Go to the family court system with spouses making false allegations against each other that could destroy their lives, their children's lives. Judges go along with it. The guardian ad litem's go along with it. And generally the lies come from the wife, okay? Because you see in this society, and I don't mean this in any way a bigoted way, but the woman is always believed the man, generally speaking, has to prove his innocence. He's not innocent until he's guilty until be proven innocent. And they come in there and they make these false allegations about the children and everything else and walk off scot-free like nothing ever happened. It's just unbelievable.
Well, here you had in the Zimmerman case, you had a very evil plan at foot with everybody participating in it, including the justice system in Florida. The evil plan was to use the tragic death of a very troubled black teen, Trayvon Martin, to put a Hispanic man in prison, Zimmerman, for only the greater good of controlling black voters. That's what it was all about. They needed something to galvanize the black vote because it wasn't in the pocket for Obama in 2012. The economy had flatlined. Everything had gotten worse for the black community, especially urban America. All the companies were leaving. They were being taxed to hell. Illegals were coming in, taking over jobs, driving down wages, and they needed something to get out the black vote. And they decided this would be it. DOJ sent down the CRS to allegedly investigate this case, and instead they came down and organized protests. So the Obama DOJ was in on it from the get-go, and when you see...
Obama was in on it from the get-go. He's the one that stoked this. He's the one who changed the equation. As we were making improvement in race relations, he lit a match, and it exploded. And it's not just about votes, Joel. It's about causing violence. It's about taking this country down. It's about destroying it. They want a civil war. They want people in the streets because then they can seize control. If they can't get it at the ballot box, they'll try to do it like the Bolsheviks in 1917.
Obama was never interested in the presidency. He was and is a professional community agitator. That's the real name for community organizer. So he simply used the office of the presidency to try to divide the country. That's been the game plan for decades for this ideology. And when you see the film, The Trayvon Hoax, it's just so obvious, and it's proven that they switched this girl for a fake witness just to get this trial going. And then they used this case to literally divide America. And the amount of people that have been killed, 33% rise in homicides, just from all this mayhem. If it was only one person, it would have been a tragedy and evil. But imagine the mayhem that's been caused for no reason, for nothing. It was all a hoax.
Well, there should be civil suits here. I pray that there will be, holding these people accountable. But there should also be criminal prosecutions. Now, don't count on it from either Florida prosecutors or federal prosecutors, but we can always consider using our citizens' grand juries to try to get justice as well. And, I think Florida is a great state. I love Florida. It has more freedom than most states in this country, but it has problems like every other state, and it needs to be cleaned up. And I remember when I was running Freedom Watch early on, I actually filed a complaint against this prosecutor, which went nowhere. It went into the trash can of the authorities in Florida, in Tallahassee. And therefore, the people need to do it on their own. They need to be able to bring about justice, because it's not going to happen through our authorities. And it's super, super important that happens. Joel, tell us, about, in addition, The Dreams of My Father, some of the other films that you've done, because people really should watch them. And it tells the story of American history in a completely different way than what you'll see on this major cable media.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've made several films on the life and career of Bob Dylan, which are really fascinating, from his 1960s civil rights movement to some of his Christian period, all the way through present times. And his, life history and journey in American folk music, country music, rock and roll, it's really the story of America. Bob Dylan is America when it comes down to following his journey from the 60s up till present. I made a film called Farewell Israel, Bush, Iran, and the Revolt of Islam, which was showing the history from the inception of Islam and the conflict between Islam and Judaism, conflict between Islam and the West, and explaining how, from the Islamic point of view, it's always been a religious conflict, not a national or ethnic conflict from the Western point of view, and how the Israelis and American foreign policy at the time promoting this idea of swapping land for peace and trying to reconcile on ethnic terms is completely irrelevant.
So we've got about 15 seconds left. Again, remind people where they can get your film and your book.
Okay,
The Trayvon Hoax.
TheTrayvonHoax.com. You can get the ebook, DVD, live stream it right there. Also on Amazon, ebook, paperback, and DVD.
Thanks for being on, my good friend. We'll have you on again soon.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now the verdict, fellow patriots, friends, and supporters. We, the people, must rise up and use citizens' grand juries to bring about justice. Our Justice Department is a paper tiger. It's worthless. Yeah, it'll prosecute you if you do something that it considers wrong. You're an ordinary person. But it will never touch the elite in Washington. It will never touch the politicians. It will never touch the corrupt judges. It will not touch people in bar associations that use their powers to try to remove people from the practice of law. It won't do that. It won't do that because it's all one giant club. Now, yeah, there's some good people out there, but they're few and far between. And remember, even the Trump judges, most of them are establishment people. They got there by scratching the backs of the right politicians, by having their law firms, labor unions, or other entities that they were working with donate huge amounts of money. WilmerHale, which is where Robert Mueller comes from, where Jeannie Rhee, two of the Mueller prosecutors, bundled hundreds of millions of dollars to get two of their own on the court in Washington, D.C., the federal court. This is the way it works. So we have to ourselves, by the way, one was a Republican, one's a Democrat. They hedge their bets. These are establishment people who will not stick their neck out. And it's exactly what we're going through with regard to all these scandals, because I bring these cases. I succeed sometimes. A lot of times I don't, but I don't give up. But the citizens' grand jury is the way that we can equalize everything, to bring the power of the American people back. It was the great Justice Antonin Scalia, as I've said before, in 1992, in a case, United States versus Williams, which said that the grand jury belongs to the American people, not the three branches of government. And let's look at the Old West. Watch the movie Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, or Tombstone about Wyatt Earp. He had to do what he thought was right. He had to make quick decisions. Sometimes he had to shoot first before he was killed. We're not advocating harming anybody, either physically or mentally or otherwise. But we, the American people, need to get much more aggressive, and we need to use these citizens' grand juries to bring about justice. So you have my word that in the next few weeks, we will be recommissioning our citizens' grand jury. We will be indicting Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. We will be indicting James Comey, Andrew McCabe, that the current Attorney General is dithering with, deciding whether to indict. I doubt that's going to happen, particularly now. He's on the defense for the reasons I said earlier. And we will be seeking justice. And we, the American people, have the right to try them fairly. We'll give them a chance to defend themselves. If they don't want to show up, that's too bad. We will sentence them, and we will seek to peacefully and legally mete out the sentence. And maybe President Trump, maybe even if he believes that he's going to be going out the door, and I hope he won't, will enforce those sentences, because he will at least have presidential power up to January 20th, 2021. And if he's going to go out, he should go out with a blaze. And he has the power to do it, and he can become our partner. Now, I hope he doesn't. I'm not telling you to vote for as head of a public interest group, but I'm telling you something. This president needs to be protected, and we at Freedom Watch are doing everything we can in that regard. And also our valiant clients, whether it's Laura Loomer, whether it's Sheriff Joe Arpaio, whether it's Chief Justice Roy Moore, whether it's Demetric Penny, whether it's Kiara Robles, this really fine gay woman who was attacked by Antifa in San Francisco at Berkeley. You can go on and on and on, and you'll see that these people are not the people that are getting on Fox News. These are the people that are actually doing things, that are sticking their neck out, that are risking their lives, their livelihoods for the American people, and because they're doing what they think is right, just like Joel Gilbert did what he thinks is right with regard to Trayvon Martin. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, support our Justice League. Go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. He stood up for you. He stood up to the so-called law, and he won. And then when he won, a Trump Justice Department is seeking to again get him retried and thrown in prison. And it tells you the deep state is strong, just like it just, eavesdropped and illegally surveilled the president of the United States over this whole Ukrainian matter. It's deeply embedded in the Justice Department and our intelligence community and other parts of Washington, D.C. We are fighting that. And so help me God, we will succeed. I want to thank you for listening. Please share this show, because this is the truth. And please, tune in again next week to another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you, God bless your family, God bless America, and God save America.